Welcome, all fellow wannabes. Welcome to the show. You are listening to the Wannabe Critic podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Gabriel Fast. I'm your only host today, actually. And we have a very special guest on the show today. We have the audio director for Supergiant Games. Darren Korb is on the show. I can't believe I just said that. Darren Korb is on the show, ladies and gentlemen. Darren, how are you feeling today, man?
I'm doing all right. Not too bad.
That's awesome. You know, we were talking a little bit off mic, just a few moments ago, and I just want to, once again express, my thanks for you coming on the show, and I'm excited to ask you some questions. And, it was just it was one of those things. Like I was telling my friends, I was like, dude, I like the guy who did all the music for Supergiant, like he's coming on the podcast, and like, how'd you swing that? And I was like, I just asked, and I think I've actually sent out some tweets. I'd sent out some tweets over the past couple of years to you, but I just, obviously the story of Hades has kind of been a tumultuous journey for you guys. And I know it's been busy, and the more interviews I watched and stuff, I was like, well, maybe he will come on the show, at some point. So, here you are. But I have to ask, before we really get into the meat of it, Hades is quote unquote done. Obviously, at this point in time, the no clip, the sixth part of the no clip documentary, which by the way, no clip just continues to kill it. Those guys. Yeah. I mean, now, is it just Danny that works on that, or does he have a team that's helping him with that?
He has Jeremy. I think it's the only other person. Jeremy does most of the camera work. And he was, when we were in the office at one point, he would come in and embed, in quote unquote, in the office for a day or two at a time and do interviews and stuff. And sometimes Danny would come in to do the interviews. But I think at the beginning of when they started filming us, Danny was still living on the East Coast, actually. So Jeremy was his person inside, for the first half, at least, I think.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's kind of that's really interesting. That was the biggest question I had always, kind of had surrounding no clip and stuff like that. But either way, it's still an awesome documentary. It's 6 parts. You got to go check it out. It was just really cool to kind of see them really be up close and personal with you guys, all the way from back at the start. I mean, felt like things kept kind of coming out surrounding Hades and stuff like that. At least it just seemed like every few months there were new episodes popping up, and I was like, well, how many episodes of this thing is there going to be? So I've enjoyed watching it, but Hades is quote unquote done. I think Amir said something in the documentary is like, well, we're patching it up and that's it. So do you feel like, you're kind of, do you feel like you can kind of breathe a little bit right now? I mean, it's got to feel good to kind of feel like Hades is done.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things where Hades is such a different experience for us, I think, because after we shipped all of our previous games, there was maybe like a month or something of maintenance that you have to do and interviews and whatever. And then, people kind of stop talking about it and you can just kind of move on to your next thing.
Yeah.
But here we are, 4 months later-ish, almost 4.5 months later, and people are still excited about it, and awards nominations are coming out. And I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I'm keeping busy with Hades-related things all the time still for 4.5 months after the game came out. So,
right.
While it does feel good to be finished working on the game, I'm sure we're going to have a final, bug fix patch or something that I'll play and check it. You know what I mean? I'm done basically on that. Sure. But it's one of those things where I don't feel distant from Hades yet because I've been continuing to work on it out. Not the game itself, but all the surrounding everything and making videos and for social media and stuff and doing that kind of stuff, doing interviews. So yeah, it's been crazy, and I mean the reaction is, it's not like anything we've ever seen before. Even though people had very kind things to say about our previous games, and we got some great responses and some really enthusiastic fans. I think just the volume of all that kind of stuff is turned way up on Hades relative to the other games.
Yeah, I love hearing that. And it's so funny you mentioned that, because I'm gonna kind of tell myself I love Supergiant. Obviously, I've dabbled in all of Supergiant's games. Bastion is one of my favorite games of all time. It's in my top 10 easily. I mean, I was kind of telling you the story of, that moment at the end of Bastion for me. That was like a huge pivotal moment as a young man. I'm like, I want to work in video games. That was the moment, right? And it was really kind of cool to see just the journey continue. It was like whenever the news came out, it's like, oh, the people behind Bastion not only are releasing a second game, the follow-up is Transistor, but they're also self-publishing now. And I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, they're going to be able to do whatever they want. And, I think for the little knowledge that I have about the games industry, having to work with, kind of be under the thumb of a publisher a little bit, like it seems like you might be kind of limited in what you can really do. So whenever you could see it move forward, with Transistor and Pyre and now Hades at this point, it's really been cool to kind of see the evolution. And I love hearing how, you guys just kind of let yourself run with whatever idea. It's like, we don't know what the next game is. We're just gonna do it, And I think for the past couple of years, Supergiant's had one of the most like wholesome stories of all time. It's like, we don't crunch. I mean, I read some, I think it was Polygon, which, they're clickbaity articles that they like to release. It's like, oh, Supergiant doesn't force crunch or whatever. I'm like, okay, well, if you're making a video game, I feel like it's do or die while you're working, but you shouldn't not be allowed to take days off. So to hear kind of like the quote unquote like forced vacation days or whatever, I mean, can you kind of just briefly speak to that for a second and kind of shed some light on crunch culture, because
for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think for our studio, we think a lot about sustainability and being able to indefinitely continue to make video games with this group of people, and in order to do that, you need to install kind of safeguards against self-inflicted burnout, because if a lot of us on the team, I think, if left to our own devices, would just sort of work forever without stopping on a lot of this stuff, so we've created a lot of policies to protect ourselves from ourselves. I think mostly is to just, okay, stop working, please. Stop, take breaks. You're going to work more efficiently on Monday if you take the weekend off, or you don't email, that stuff like that. Just like the mandatory vacation days and stuff is one of those things where it's like, we set those policies up in response to the way that we initially worked on Bastion, for example. And just like when we started out, all the eggs were in this basket. It was our one shot. It was our first time. So there's like a steeper learning curve. There was a lot more like banging your head against stuff. And I think, eventually we put these policies in place, I think after Transistor, just to try and help us sustain ourselves and to be, just to make sure that the people involved didn't burn themselves out, just by constantly working all the time. And individuals can have late nights if they want. Individuals can do work on the weekend if they choose to, but we actively try to discourage it. Basically, is all we can do. I think, yeah.
Which is awesome. I think that's an awesome policy, and it really. And by the way, just before I forget, I live in the boonies. I live out in the country. So just in case we lose connection, be cool. I'll be right back. I'll reconnect, Zoom. Just wanted to throw that out.
I'll just hang out. Yep.
Yeah. I meant to tell you that off mic, but I forgot. I love, it's gotta feel amazing, being able to come to work every day. Of course you're not in the office anymore. And, I wanted to kind of talk about COVID, the results of COVID. Of course, the documentary kind of got into that a little bit, and I'm trying not to recycle things and bits that I've heard from other places, but that's hard, But, how cool is it that you get to go to work and make something that you really enjoy doing, right? And then people end up loving it. Do you just kind of like look at a mirror and the other people and like all the stuff that you made, and it's like, they like it? Did you see this? Like, how, like, that's got to be, and none of you ever given a whiff of like not being humble. It just kind of seems like you guys are grateful to be in the position that you're in. And I mean, what does that feel like whenever you literally everything you touch turns to gold? What's that like?
That's very generous. I mean, it's sort of like, it's definitely like living the dream, just to sort of use a cliche. It's certainly like to be able to do the thing that I enjoy the most, to do a creative thing that is really fulfilling and rewarding creatively, and is something that I like. It's just, it's what I want to be doing. If I were to make a list of other things I'd want to be doing, I don't know that there are any things that I'd want to be doing more, So to be able to do the thing that I love the most, for my day job is really delightful and special. And we all know how lucky we are to be in that position. I mean, because I think all of us have been in a position where we were not doing that before, in some way or another. So, and we know how hard it is to even have an opportunity to do that, and then to have people like it enough that we get to continue doing it is we all know that there's so much luck involved with anything having any success at a particular moment in time. It's got to be the right time and just the right set of circumstances to have something take off. Every year there's more and more games released, and the field is more and more crowded, and it's harder to bubble up to the top of the conversation and everything. So, we, I certainly don't take it for granted. I don't think we do as a team that, that this is something that, we'll always just get to do this. I think we have to earn it every time. And that's kind of, we have a real, I think that sort of motivates a lot of what we do, is we're really trying to continue to do things that are exciting to us creatively, and to expand our comfort zones, and improve as much as we can at what we do, and to make something that people can sink their teeth into creatively.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I love hearing that. And you touched on something to me that is really cool. I think, yeah, luck is such a weird word, right?
Yeah,
I think it truly boils down to what you said. I mean, your band Control Group. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like you go in and you record stuff, and it's like, all right, that was fun.
Yeah.
People listening to it and enjoying it is a whole other thing. And that, if that never happens, it's like, are you content with the experience of, we made this thing we're really proud of?
Yeah.
And I think that should be with anything creatively. Like if you're approaching it just to please other people first, I think inherently you're going to get burnt out, and you will probably fail. But it's just kind of crazy to me to know. I'm going to make you feel really old for a second. You were my age whenever it's just crazy for me to think about, because I kind of have a hobnob studio here.
Yeah.
I'm an aspiring creator, musician, whatever, production,
Yeah.
And it's crazy to think it's like Darren Korb was in his his New York apartment with his, one of his best friends, Logan Cunningham, obviously, who does still work, obviously works for Supergiant as well. And you made all the music in that place, in your apartment. And that just, to me, clicked. And it was even more of like a thing is like, you can make anything sound good given your circumstances, if you're willing to like kind of tool around with it. And I think being prepared for the opportunities, I think, is definitely huge. And it sounds like you all were. But at the same time, like, you earned it every step of the way. Supergiant has earned everything it's had, and it just continues to be one of the coolest stories in video games. Like, it's so fun. Yeah, I mean, it's just so fun to follow. And yeah, I'm just, it's Darren freaking Korb, ladies and gentlemen. Like, he's here, ladies and gentlemen.
To speak to something you just said real quick, it's part of it's about being prepared. I think, just like doing your craft the best you can and trying to improve constantly. But I think part of it also is about leaping at something you are not necessarily prepared for. I think that's part of the key too, is just accepting the opportunity, even if there's a worm of self-doubt that is trying to tell you you're not ready. You just have to like find out by doing it, I think, is part of the thing for me. I mean, I always it's really motivating for me on something, actually on a project, when I feel like I do not know how to execute every piece of it, and it's something, it gives me an opportunity to learn, and it's like, directed study and learning. And I like to learn that way and improve that way. So finding an opportunity that is like just above your level of comfort, just the right amount, whatever that amount is for you, is I think something that's really been that I've really enjoyed over time, and has really helped me kind of focus on my craft as much as possible, and try to get the most out of a project creatively for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, just to kind of speak to just piggyback off of that a little bit, like it keeps you humble too, whenever you do maybe the 100 times you grasp for, like for me, aspiring content creator, there's a million other creators out there that are way better than me, but I have a leg up in that no one else is like me. So you never know unless you try. And I love hearing you say that. So it's like, for me, it's like I ask 100 different people. It's like, hey, will you come on my podcast? I'm trying to do this for work. And then the one that eventually comes back ends up being like a huge hero of mine. So, or one of the ones. So it's funny how it works out like that.
Yeah.
And, it's nice hearing you being in the position that you're in, saying something like that. It's like, you got to keep, because it's not luck. It is, I mean, we use the term luck. It is strategy.
It's a little both, I think, right?
Yeah.
It's you do the work to prepare as much as you can, and then when the thing comes up, you just say yes to whatever it is. Like you have to be open to the opportunities.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So yeah, it's been 15 minutes already, and we haven't gotten to actually one question that I've written down. So that's what happens. I figured, I was like, God, I hope this guy, he's gonna come on. I'm gonna sound like an idiot, and like we're just gonna get to talking. This guy is, it's just, here we are. So I feel like I've heard your backstory of how you got into Supergiant about 50 times now.
Yeah.
But just briefly, I think I'm going to use your words. I think in an interview I heard recently, you said something like, "Oh, you just kind of lucked into being able to work at Supergiant."
Yeah.
What's that mean? How do you just luck into it?
Well, my good buddy Amir Rao co-founded Supergiant, and we grew up together. Started playing D&D when we were like 9 years old together. Playing in bands as middle schoolers and teenagers all through college, and collaborated on stuff creatively for fun over the years. We went to elementary, middle school together, went to different high schools in the same area. We lived near each other growing up, and then both went to different colleges in New York. So we were, connected all those years. Out of college, he got a job at EALA and was working there for a few years. And after a few years of that, decided with some people he'd met there to strike out on his own and try to start his own studio, which was Supergiant. And when that happened, he just kind of asked me like, "Hey, I think you could probably do this. Do you want to do all the audio for this game we're working on?" And I was like, yeah, of course I do. That sounds awesome.
Like, punch me in the face. Am I sleeping?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Definitely. Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, that was it. So I think, lucked into it is probably the right description for that.
I can't remember who it was. It was a guy. He has a good podcast. I can't remember, or, I think it was good. It was a good interview. And man, it's been so funny to like hear other people talking about you, and like they ask a question that I already know the answer to, and I'm like, why did you ask that? And it's one of the funniest things ever.
Yeah.
But I thank you for kind of telling about that. Amir,
Sure.
Just what I've seen of him on camera, he seems like just like a super cool guy, and you kind of start to piece all these things together. It's like each kind of member of Supergiant, 'cause it's a relatively small team.
Yes.
How many people are there?
Right now, I think we're just shy of 20 people.
Okay, gotcha. But I think most of who we saw on camera was mostly just like the relative leads and certain departments and stuff like that. You kind of start to like piece everything together, and it's like, okay, they all make up this really cool pie, and it starts to make even more sense. Like, it just genuinely, yes, you're working, but you're working with like not only some of what seem like the coolest people ever, but like you're genuine like best friends, which I can't imagine whenever you do have success, how much more, how much more better it feels, whenever you do have a win. So that's really, really cool. So thank you for shedding some light. Now you know how Darren Korb is. He's just a wannabe like the rest of us, ladies and gentlemen. He lucked into the music or the games industry. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. I had a quick question about music composition for you, because I think as a younger kid, for me, I would listen to the Bastion soundtrack and stuff, and I'm like, oh, this guy's got to be like a genius, like composer, like all this other stuff. But then the more I started to like kind of do research, you kind of seem like more of like a rocker. You know
Yep.
what I mean? So in terms of like working on something, because I know, from, and I'm not trying to like pull myself in with you, but like whenever I'm working on like a wedding video or a specific video for something, and because I do all the music for my stuff, I kind of ask myself, well, what is the vibe for this? Like, how do you go about, how do you personally go about getting the ID for your songs,
Yeah.
for your games?
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah. So as you said, my background is more in songwriting and sort of rock music. And I do not, in fact, have any composer training. And even still, I approach most of my compositions like I'd approach a song. They're structured mostly like songs as well. I mean, for me, I think at the beginning of a project, I really do a lot of work to figure out what the palette is going to be, what the sonic palette is going to be, and so to determine that, I ask myself a series of questions like, what is the setting of this game? What sort of instruments would exist in this place? What kind of songs would people write? What kind of music would people listen to? What are the textures that are going to make sense viscerally with this setting? And so that determines sort of like one pillar of the musical palette. And then I ask myself about the tone and what is the vibe of this? What sort of tone am I trying to convey with this? And then that'll determine, I usually try to have a few different components to like juxtapose against one another to create something that to synthesize into something that feels a little bit new, hopefully. So it's not just, even if I took three existing genres, I think combining them in a strange, unexpected way would feel a little bit more new than if I had just used one or two of them in by themselves, is the theory. And so then I'll determine that, and then I'll try to figure out a third thing that sort of is like a wild card thing that I guess is the best way I can describe it, that sort of has an interesting effect when you combine it with those other things.
Okay.
And helps define the setting of the game. So for Hades, for example, I have the one pillar is the sort of Mediterranean instruments to represent the place, and then one pillar is like the prog rock for the hell component, the underworld component. It's part of the vibe thing. It's both setting and vibe, right?
Yeah.
And then the final component is meant to reflect the game's sort of quirkiness or lightheartedness, and it's the sort of like Halloween music, theremin type sound that's present through a lot of the soundtrack. So that's sort of how I arrived at that, and the reason for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that perfectly sums up the thing, because I think for me, and I don't know if you're this way, but like whenever I'm trying to make something or I get an idea in my head for whatever it might be, do you ever find yourself kind of being like you'll like make a riff or like a progression, you're like, oh, that kind of sounds like Queens of the Stone Age, or that kind of sounds like whatever, I really like the way that sounds, how can I innovate on that? Do you ever find yourself kind of doing that, just so I'm not like crazy?
Yeah, sometimes, for sure. I mean, I will certainly like try to emulate vibes in particular. I'll be like, oh man, this one moment in this Radiohead song, like I want to create a moment that makes me feel like that moment makes me feel.
Totally.
Or I want this song in Asphodel to be real sludgy and just feel kind of like Black Sabbath, but not be a Black, you know what I mean? I want to evoke Black Sabbath with this,
Right.
like, so I'll point at vibes, like very specifically. And because also I know whatever I do with it is not going to end up sounding exactly like the thing. I'm going to, just filtered through my brain is going to come out a little different. So I feel comfortable doing that sort of thing. And it doesn't feel like ripping stuff off to me, because it's just trying to create moments, that are evocative of moments that I like and stuff like that.
Totally. And I think I think that you can't invent anything that's new, but what you can do is you take an idea like what you're saying, and you're like, okay, I'm, this is a love note to whatever, Black Sabbath or the Beatles or whatever. And like you said, you filter it back and forth, and you're like, to where eventually it comes out sounding like Darren Korb, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, Yeah, I'm good with this. And only it's funny because then only you know specifically where those notes are unless you connect with someone who like
Yeah.
who's like, you were going for Black Sabbath there, weren't you? And you're like, yeah, totally. You know,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So that kind of answers that question. You know, obviously this is a kind of a geek culture podcast. You know, we do lots of different things on the Wannabe Critic podcast. But one of our more recent projects was dedicating a feed to music, which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, go check that out. If you would do so, that'd be awesome. So I'm a big music nerd. I'm a big music geek. I love music. I love music. I think I love games more than music at this point, like creating. But they're pretty close to each other. But I can talk music. I can talk music all day easily. I wanted to talk about kind of some of your musical experiences outside of just video games, because there's some interesting stuff there. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is kind of like more of a minor one almost. Let me pull this up right here. So Rickety Stitch.
Oh yeah.
Tell me about that, because that's super interesting. As a comic series, like, did someone call you up and was like, hey, what are your rates? I mean, how'd that happen?
So two of my good buddies make that comic series.
Okay.
That I grew up with, who grew up with Amir and I, and we've grown up playing D&D with. We still regularly play together. So some of my elementary school buddies, basically, who were making this who make this comic series, and just asked me to, or I volunteered. Basically, it was like, anything you need. I mean, I've collaborated with them creatively over the years, and we used to make kind of joke songs together. They've been making comics together since high school, and I've been making supplemental music with them for their comics since then. So it's just, continuing to do that thing for fun, basically.
Yeah. I mean, that's really cool. I mean, it looks like I gotta, go check out Rickety Stitch. Seems like a pretty, lighthearted story. The music's great. I was like, this is cool, and
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. One of them, Evan Wolverton is the guy who does one of the songs, or two of the songs, I think, and I do one of them so far, or something like that. I'm going to do a couple more, I think, for the next book.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, definitely go check out Rickety Stitch, by the way. So let's talk about two big ones here for a minute. And I'm like I said, I have a million questions, I feel like, so I'm going to try and not. It's like, God, there's so many facets. Like, the more I learn about Darren Korb, it's like, I just want to be friends with Darren Korb. So you got to record with Steve Albini.
Yes, it did.
That is insane. Like,
yeah.
Literally, whenever I heard, because I didn't know a ton about Steve Albini. I'm only 25.
Yeah.
But I didn't know a ton about Steve Albini until the Foo Fighters documentary, Sonic Highways, came out, and I got to learn a lot. And like the way they made the way they made him seem in that documentary is just kind of like a take it or leave it attitude. And it's like, obviously his music from back in the day is punk rock group. The name of the band escapes me. I can't quite remember.
Yeah, Shellac and Big Black and
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're showing your age, Darren. No. So what was that experience like? To work with the guy who produced In Utero. I mean,
amazing. I mean, it was a dream. I mean, it was like, as a fan of the Pixies and Nirvana and Breeders and like all these bands that he's like defined, he made like definitive sounding Steve Albini sounding albums for all these incredible bands that I love, and worked with everybody under the sun. He's the engineer on like Page and Plant and like, whatever. I mean, he's done like everything. And he kind of has a reputation. He's in particular back in the day was very outspoken, and was a little bit notorious maybe. And he's just like got a real punk rock attitude, and he's such a rad guy. So cool. And like, really, like, we were in there. So it's my band Control Group. I was living across the country, and we hadn't done anything for a few years. Like, they were still in New York. And, I was just watching a YouTube, like a talk that Steve Albini did, or an interview he did at some university in Australia or something. And in the interview, he's like, yeah, you can just go to my studio's website and just book me. Like, I'm not proud. I'll take anyone's money. I don't care, like, and so I was like looking, clickety right away. I was like, sent an email to my bandmates and was like, yo, we could just go record with Steve Albini, like, apparently. And it's not astronomical. I mean, it's, it's studios are expensive, but it's not like for a world-renowned, famous engineer. It's not. It wasn't unreasonable at all. And some people's midlife crisis is they go and buy a car or something. We went and had like a weekend, like a studio weekend or sleepaway camp, rock and roll sleepaway camp with my bandmates. And it was such a blast. We were there for 3 days, and we stayed in the studio in dorms that you can rent in the studio. And so we'd record from 10 to 10 with Steve Albini. We'd go have dinner. We'd come back and we'd like write lyrics and we'd do whatever, and we'd stay up till 2 getting sounds and stuff, and then we'd do it all again the next day. It was unbelievable. We came with 2 songs already written and arranged. We wrote 3 more there like during the 3 days and recorded them all with vocals and everything, mixed everything, and we did it all to tape. No computers involved at all.
Oh, I hate you. I'm so jealous. Like
it was a blast. I mean, it was a real crazy blast. And you can just book Steve Albini if you go to, I think it's what's the name of this website? Electrical Audio, I believe. It's in Chicago.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm jealous because, ever since that, and I don't know, like Foo Fighters, like my favorite band of all time.
Yeah.
That might be weird, but I remember watching, Line Over Wasting Light came out and they were talking about like, like recording on tape. And I'm like,
yep.
You like tape, like cassette tape, like cassette tapes and stuff, and getting more into music and stuff and just realizing, anyone thinks that they're good now, like musician wise. And that's not to be like mean or anything.
Yeah.
I don't, I think there was like a phrase thrown around in another documentary about like, people who have no business in the music industry, like are able to like make music and stuff. And I think that's kind of messed up, like a messed up mentality actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think there is some truth to whenever you can like sit down and it's like, all right, play good, because we only have a certain amount of money that will only buy us a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And you gotta play good, and just to know that, if I wanted, obviously I don't take for granted the fact that it's amazing. And obviously you too, being able to record in a home studio and make something professional and like living doing it, that's amazing. But I can't imagine what the experience must have been like to record on tape. And it's like, oh crap, like we got to redo that. Like what was that experience like to be able to record on tape?
It was really eye-opening for me. It was fantastic because, the mentality I've had and the way I was even taught to record is just so fundamentally different from the way that Steve Albini approaches things. Because in the digital recording space, or at least the way I was taught, you want to record everything as dry as possible, nothing on it, like naked, and then you apply all of the stuff to make it sound however you want to make it sound afterwards in either through outboard gear or plugins or whatever. But Steve Albini is just like, it should just sound how you want it to sound going to the tape. Like that's the best result. Like you don't make this, you make the decision earlier in the process. You make it now, and then later, the mix is like just sort of balancing everything, and you're doing much less. It's a much less involved mixing process than what I do, my home studio, because I have to create all of the sounds in post essentially. So yeah, it's such a different process, and it was so cool. I mean, one thing, there were 2 like pretty eye-opening things for me, which were counter to the way I'd done stuff in the past. So we recorded everything at the same time, the drums, the bass and guitar, and the guitar and the vocals were scratch, but the guitar, we were going to try and keep as much of the guitar and bass as we could and do just little punch-ins to fix problems. And we wanted to initially to set up in the room with the drums, and then we'd have our amps in another room, was what we thought, because that's how we'd always done it before. But Steve Albini's like, no, if you actually are in the room with the amp, it's going to sound a lot better, because the pickup proximity to the amp, you're going to get some natural feedback, and it's going to sound better. You should be in the, you have a wall of glass between you and the drummer, and you're in an isolation room with the amps. And I was like, duh, that's just such a simple, it's just such a simple, of course, but every studio I'd ever been in didn't do it that way, And then the other thing that blew my mind was he has some really remarkable miking techniques, but one of the things that he did when I was recording vocals was I was in the big live room there, big empty, reverby live room, and he had a close mic, standard vocal close mic, and then he had, a room mic far away on the floor, and he had them blended. So the room mic was just reverb, essentially. It was just a reverb mic that was actually picking up the room reverb. And the thing that was so crazy is that when I sang quietly, it was intimate in my headphones and it just sounded, close and whatever. And then when I sang loud, just naturally, it got big and huge and reverby because that's just what was happening in the room. It's like such a kind of moment for me, but it sounded, it was so easy to give a fun vocal performance because it just sounded like I was standing in a room singing with no headphones on because it sounded so natural. My voice sounds so natural. So it's just one of those things where like a lot of it is common sense stuff that I've been taught that is not the correct method for multi-track recording. And so he just has his own methodology and it makes perfect sense. And it's a very logical way to approach things for the process that he uses. And so that stuff was really eye-opening for me and really just a ton of fun. And I've taken some of my learnings. I mean, I don't operate that way. I don't have an incredible big room I can record stuff in, but I've taken a lot of the lessons back with me and tried to sort of make sure that like the headphone mix is good when you're recording vocals and stuff. That makes a big difference, and try to really like, try to make sure that stuff, that you feel as comfortable as possible when you're doing the take.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I could hear you talk about that all day, literally.
Yeah, I could talk about it all day.
I mean, and you know what? Forget the questions. Forget it. Just talk about Steve Albini and recording with Control Group, which, by the way, I did listen to you guys' music, and that's some good stuff too, man. I mean, I can definitely hear like some, it's got kind of like that stick it to the man mentality, a little bit is kind of what I got from it, but it really reminded me of like, I heard felt like a little bit of Radiohead influence there and like some Weezer influence. And for some reason I was kind of picking up some, even though there's not really any piano, I was like, this kind of reminds me of Ben Folds for some reason. I don't know why.
Oh, cool. He's got that vibe. Yeah. He's got like a little quirky, like a little edgy kind of quirk vibe. The other thing I meant to say actually, which is addressing your question directly, is like the thing that recording to tape makes you do is it makes you fundamentally change the way you think about what level of mistake, quote unquote, is acceptable. So it will not be perfect, and recording to tape, you do not have that option.
Yeah, it shouldn't be, right?
Unless you play it perfectly, or even played perfectly, quote unquote. It's not going to be, like the waveforms aren't going to be lined up if you look at them in a computer. So you just have to make calls about, well, this take had a little flub there, but it had a better feel overall. And this take did, and you just kind of pick. And you're just like, well, you get 3 takes, pick one. It's like, cool, all right. And you just kind of, it just makes you reframe how you think about that stuff. And part of the thing I've realized, like listening back to some of my favorite records of all time, is like, there's flubs all over the place. You listen to Beatles, like there's all sorts of mistakes in there and they give it character and they're cool. And Led Zeppelin, like Jimmy Page is like, dropping notes and stuff. And it's like, he doesn't care. I mean, it's part of the thing. It's like, the point is not to execute all the notes perfectly. It's to convey the feeling of the thing you're trying to do. And that's part of, because the temptation when you have the power to fix all of your mistakes is to do that. Right. When you're working on digital stuff. And I've tried, especially after that experience, I've tried to be a little bit less, a little bit less intense about how I edit stuff. I'll try to like get it close and then just kind of leave some room for humanity in there,
Yeah, no, I love hearing that, and I think that's kind of the main thing for me, where it's like, I wish I had the resources and time, right? You have to kind of pick and choose. Seems like you kind of had the luxury, not the luxury, but you made time to do this thing you really wanted to do. I think you made a joke about it being a midlife crisis. You made time. It's like, we're going to record on tape. This is how we're going to do it. And you listen, they don't make records like they used to anymore. Like they just don't. And everything's about an agenda and getting it out on streaming platforms at the right time. And like now people are releasing stuff in chunks because the newer generation doesn't have the attention span to actually get through a new record. which is so frustrating because as someone who reviews records on YouTube, it's like, this sucks. Like 90% of the stuff I'm listening to sucks. And it's just so frustrating because you hear parts of it. It's like, that was really good. Like,
Yeah.
why couldn't the whole thing be like that? And it's like, oh, because the production, whatever, they're wanting to rush it out because it has to be on Spotify and Apple Music by X amount of time. And it's just, no one makes God, I could talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
God.
It's I mean, certainly the record business is real tough. I mean, the music industry at large is, crumbling to pieces again, I mean, over and over again, it keeps doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing. It's like there was a time when, I think probably in the 70s and back, between the Beatles and then the like end of the 70s, where, record companies just had a bunch of money to give bands to make albums, and then they didn't really, I think it was, what happened was, I think Frampton Comes Alive came out and sold like 11 million copies or something. And it made all the record companies go like, oh, we can do that. Every record should be that. And it just totally reframed the way that record companies thought about releasing records. Like they're like chasing hits,
Yeah.
and then that changed the paradigm and then I think there's been like a line, and then the technology's changed, of course. And
it's a shame.
It's all a lot of factors.
Yeah, no, there is a lot of factors. And I just think about, I've heard you talk about in interviews too, how you never really saw like video game music. And I think it was kind of funny. I was watching an interview, the Viking Blonde. I think he asked you a question or something like that.
Yep.
And he was like, all right, one of his listeners was like, oh, what's your favorite video game composer? And like, you thought for a second, and I was like, I don't think Darren Korb actually listens to video game music as much as the rest of us do. And as someone now, you've moved into this industry and working on video games and stuff. How does that make you feel, knowing that in a way we kind of have like a passion for this music that makes us feel a certain way, that kind of like throws it back to the way that it used to be done, the ways of yesteryear and stuff like that, where it was like music was made to make you feel something, not to sell you something.
Yeah.
I mean, does that make you kind of feel, do you feel like as time has gone on, do you feel like, yeah, I'm definitely like in the right industry? Like, of course, you'd probably love Control Group to have a #1 hit or whatever, but do you feel like the level of attention you've gotten from the music you're making here, does it bring you that kind of satisfaction? It's like, holy crap, like
yeah, I mean,
millions and millions of streams. Like,
that's incredible. No, I mean, I especially after kind of toiling away on stuff that nobody was interested in for a long time, it's incredible to make stuff, to have Bastion come out and then all of a sudden have a bunch of people interested in the music. So it's really, it is really satisfying for sure to see that the music is touching people and making an impact on them, and to have people enthusiastic about it is incredible. I mean, I've gotten opportunities to do things I never would have dreamed of. I got to record at Abbey Road. I got to play concerts with the chamber orchestra for 3,000 people. I mean, it's crazy, like the stuff that I've been able to do because of this music, and it's, I don't take it for granted, certainly. And I enjoy this stuff, as much as I enjoy the Control Group stuff, as much as I enjoy, whatever. I mean, it's all a blast for me. And, I think as a younger person, I had some fantasies about like touring, whatever, being in like a big touring band or whatever, maybe, but I don't think that's even something I would want as an adult with a child and a whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it's not something that's an attractive lifestyle for me anymore.
Yeah, no. And I think, hearing you say that too, is like, that was one of the biggest questions I had, but I just didn't really have the balls to ask it, is like, do you get the same level of satisfaction out of what you've done for Supergiant as to what you've done for your own personal stuff? And it sounds like you have, because you're getting to execute ideas that you want to execute. No one's giving you an agenda. Like, you are your own boss. And that's incredible. Like, that is the dream, right? You're making a living doing what you really want to be doing, which is music. So that's incredible. And you bring up Abbey Road, which I'm still awaiting my vinyl. I can't wait to get it.
I know.
I'm so excited. I
finally approved we had a problem with the lacquer masters, and I had to get so that's the part of what caused the delay, and I had to approve we they had to fix it, and I approved. So everything's been approved. Hopefully, I'm not sure what the timeline is on that, but hopefully soon.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna get it in the mail whenever it's ready. I've been listening to the digital version and like sobbing in my car whenever like whenever I got through the entire thing. And then the last, like the ode to Bastion, or bring the Bastion, and then whenever just the mix for Setting Sail coming home with the strings and stuff, and I was like I actually got tears in my eyes just because I was like, wow, this is just incredible, to see. I never would have thought that a moment that was so insane for me would be just to see it 10 years later. You know what I mean? Like, reimagine. I can't imagine what that was like for you, and I did watch the brief short in Abbey Road, but let's forget about the nostalgia stuff. You got to record at Abbey Road.
Yes, I did.
It was like, what? Like,
it was crazy.
When you and Ashley Barrett go in there and like to record stuff, to like you're talking and like bouncing ideas and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, are you just kind of like looking at each other and like kind of the same way whenever you're working on stuff in the studio or the office? Are you like, we're in freaking Abbey Road working on music that we made? Like,
yeah, it's bananas. I mean, we practiced for that a lot because we were approaching the session like more like a live performance where we were going to record our vocals a lot at the same time as the orchestra was going to play, and we were going to try to do it as live as possible because we knew we only had 2 days in the studio to record 12 tracks. So we wanted to make sure that everything was sort of going to go smoothly, and so we weren't like working stuff out for the most part in the studio. There were a couple like In the Blood we did, it took a little longer because it was a brand new song, but for the most part we'd done all that work, and we could just, when we were there, we were just like, ooh, like looking at each other like, are we really here? What's happening? That's kind of had to do the thing,
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's funny, I've listened to, I think there's 2 or 3 live performances, with you and Ashley Barrett on YouTube, and I listened to both of those. And I'm like, hey, this is the same freaking arrangements that I just listened to on the live thing that I just got in my email. And that's amazing though, because I bet playing for those people and doing that stuff, it's like, we have to get this, like, make this special. How are we gonna make it special? We're gonna record it at Abbey Road, and then we're gonna release a special edition vinyl, and I can't wait to get that. So that's kind of cool to hear you get to be able to geek out about that. Like, that's
for sure.
That had to have been amazing. So I have to, my questions are kind of like imploding on each other a little bit. I have to ask, whenever you're working on Hades, whenever the idea came up that you might be able to get to rock out a little bit, because you hadn't really been able to do that in any of the other games. Bastion had kind of like a more bohemian type feel to it, and Transistor had more of that like cyberpunk feel to it, which I understand. Transistor was kind of more of a tumultuous process, really hard to make. And then Pyre, it kind of feels like you guys just got to let loose a little bit, but kind of went back to more of like a Celtic vibe and stuff. So whenever the idea for Hades rolls around, and it's like, whenever the idea pops in your mind that you might get to rock out, how did you keep it cool? To Amir and what's the other guy's name? I forgot. Yeah, I mean, how do you keep it cool? And it's like, yeah, I can make that work. Like,
well, it's one of those things where, I mean, initially when we started working on what became Hades, it was not set in the underworld. We had a different setting, a different creative idea for it initially, and so the sort of rock component didn't come into that until we did like a sort of creative redirect. Because the underworld is what told me I should rock, it's like, the metal, it comes from hell. So
kind of like a doomy type vibe a little bit, right?
I just feel like if you have a game in hell without metal, then it's very sad.
It's a trap.
Missed opportunity. That's some sort of hard rock,
Yeah.
It's a missed opportunity there, unless you really got some specific subversion of the thing that you want, going on, and that's cool. But yeah, I it just seemed to fit. It was not even a thing that I tried to force on it. I was just like, well, this is just what it needs, and I was happy to do it because I like you said, I hadn't I'd been able to cut loose a little bit on stuff like Thrash Pact and whatever, but not really. I hadn't really properly been able to rock on any of the previous projects. So I was certainly pleased to do something that was much closer to my background than I'd done before. That was really a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I mean, it was kind of cool watching, during the No Clip documentary. I think you were recording drums for, before the game went into early access, and just watching him, like, he looks like he's having a great time. And it looks like, I have an electric kit right behind me that you can't see. That was like, I've taken videos and stuff, that's kind of lame to record like a drum cover with an electric drum set, but it's all I have. Okay, people.
Yeah,
like,
I get
what you got. And but it was kind of one of those things. It was like, dude, he's just having a good time. Like, yes, it is. I'm gonna show up to work, like you're gonna show up to work and like record drums all day. And obviously, the real work comes in post, but to be able to record drums for hours, like that's awesome. And it was kind of, from one musician to another, it was kind of like, finally Darren Korb gets to actually like express himself, like in the roots of it, right? Get to do it. And that's amazing.
Yeah. It's a ton of fun.
God, I have a lot more questions. I don't know how much more time you have, but
we can go a bit more.
Okay, cool. So obviously, there was touched on a little bit about COVID and stuff like that. And I feel like it's almost disrespectful in a way to not ask, how have you been doing? How have you been doing during COVID? Like how has that been affecting you?
Surprisingly fine. On a sort of micro level, I mean, my family's doing fine. My kid is coping surprisingly well with Zoom classes. He's like discovered Minecraft, so he's happy or whatever, he's occupied. I go outside to walk the dog. That's about it, wear 2 masks.
Yeah.
We're just hunkered down. I mean, we're just trying to ride this out. And we've been, my parents just got their first vaccine, just their first shot of the vaccine. So it's very exciting. It's just like stuff is starting to happen. Things are starting to turn around. Maybe it's going to be a while still, but I think the thing that is starting to wear on me a little bit is just the duration of this whole thing is longer than it had to be. And that makes me feel frustrated. But I mean, I'm not complaining too much. It would be nice to hang out with some other people. Like, I love my family, but it would be nice to see some other people too every once in a while.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I have to ask too, you got a student, you got a room full of equipment there. And, I got my, your computers and you got your game systems and stuff. And like, is it one of those things, like whenever COVID kind of rolled around, like, obviously you're not happy about it, but like, you're just kind of like, okay, like, I can't really see anybody, but I'm not struggling necessarily as much as I thought I would type thing.
I mean, I get to work from home, it's just that is a lot of people don't have that luxury. So I realize that I'm very lucky in that regard. So, I consider myself extremely lucky to be able to work from home and also do fun stuff. And to be, Supergiant and myself, we've had an incredible moment during this whole COVID thing. It's the entire finaling and release of Hades all happened in lockdown. So, we certainly, like, on a personal level and a micro level and stuff, like there's been some incredible stuff happened during this horrible period. So, it's certainly, I'm glad, honestly, like, I'm really glad I had Hades to work on during this time, because it really was something I could just kind of focus on and pour myself into and not think about politics and not think about the state of things and not think about the deadly virus and not think about the
all the
just
crap.
Like, let me just I'm just gonna record 100 Zagreus lines, instead of thinking about this,
like, I'm just gonna, like, the world sucks. It's always sucked. It sucks more right now than it ever has, really, for me personally. I'm just gonna hunker down. It's like the wife walks in, like, I'm right in the middle, so it's like, get out, like, just get out of here. No, I'm kind of, obviously you get to work at Supergiant, and I work for Wannabe Critic Productions, which makes $0, by the way. But I totally get the thing of just being able to throw yourself at whatever you're doing, and just, like you said, just kind of hunker down and just ride this thing out, and I feel like, I think it's all kind of wearing on us. It's taboo to talk about in a way. It's kind of, or at least it's like, oh, well, you went and did such and such, and it's like, dude, I gotta get, like, I live in the country, like I gotta go get groceries, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
somehow, and it's just, I'm sick of it. I'm just as sick of it as you are, Darren. But
Yeah.
it's nice to hear that you've kind of been able to write it out relatively easily. I don't mean to tear open any old wounds, but
Yeah.
obviously, there was a break-in at Supergiant, and I have a few instruments here,
Yep.
that you
Yep.
can see
Yeah.
them. These are like my kids. Like, I don't want anyone coming
Yeah.
around them that I
Yeah.
don't know. I've spent a lot of time with these things, and some of your instruments were stolen.
Yeah. Um, it was it was a bummer, but it wasn't. It was more just a bummer for sentimental reasons. Like I knew right away, I was like, we have insurance, we can replace these things, you know, and the things that were stolen. uh, It's not like my only electric. I have multiple electric guitars. I had like multiple. The things that were stolen, I had like other versions of, so I could at least continue to be productive and work. Um, there were two bummers for me of the stuff that was stolen. One of them was a guitar I got when I was a teenager. That was like my first nice guitar, which is it's like a Fender Strat. A nice Fender Strat that I like, but again, they make those still. I can get one. I can get a new one. It's fine. But the other one was there's this guitar guy who just makes guitars in his apartment in New York called Richie's. He makes Richie's guitars. I don't know if he's still around, but I'm doing that. But he makes like Frankenstein guitars. He'll just like acquire parts and build guitars and stuff. And I had this cool, it's like a red semi-hollow kind of Art Deco tuner, like almost like a D'Angelico look guitar. That was really pretty. I used it on a lot on Transistor and a little bit on Pyre. And so I was sad to see that one go, because that's kind of a one of a kind guitar. But again, it's like everything can be replaced. I wasn't too bent out of shape about it, honestly. I was like, well, at least they didn't steal anything that isn't replaceable. They didn't take. It would have been worse if they tried to take my computer, but it was just I had like a rat's nest of cables attaching the computer to my desk, so they just couldn't steal it.
Yeah, no, yeah,
dude, that would have been way worse. The computer
Right.
would have been way worse.
Right.
Because that's much harder to replace, and it's just such a pain in the butt to try to reinstall everything properly. So just the fact that they didn't get the computer, I was real happy about.
That's so.
Of course,
I mean,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I hate Zoom.
Well, and of course, there's stuff that's more important than any of my stuff that didn't get stolen, which is awesome.
Yeah, well, that is good. And two things, for one, it's like the sentimentality value. It's like, oh man, like they'd say, I think there was a shot of you guys, while COVID was going. It's like no one's in the office. Those instruments are there. He's evidently not using those instruments. They're there. So they're to look at, right?
Yeah.
And like in a way, kind of there to look at. But still, if I had my guitar, my first, I have just like a spruce top Martin that, it's kind of like my first nice guitar. I think it was like $600 or $700. If that got stolen, I'd be heartbroken because I have another guitar that's nicer, but I won't replace those memories, and I was kind of curious about that, as to how that made you feel, and
I mean, and honestly, the reason I didn't bring them all home is just because, when lockdown happened, we went home in a hurry. I mean, I got back from PAX East. I had like 4 days in the office. That Friday, we're like, okay, take home all the stuff you need at your house. We're not coming back, So I just grabbed the stuff that I could, and I was like, well, I have an electric guitar. I have a couple electric guitars at home. I've got another acoustic guitar. I don't need to bring these. These can stay here, and I'll come back and get them if I need them. Basically, was the thinking. And I was mostly done. I only had 2 more pieces of music to make or something. So I figured my electric, I didn't need it. I could leave it there. And I had some redundancy with all the stuff at the office at that point. The stuff I didn't bring home.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Right on. I'm going to try and kind of couple these questions together. They say, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And, as I can see, obviously we both know that that's not true. Like it is still work, but it just happens to be work you enjoy. Like work doesn't have to be unenjoyable, but it is still work, like whenever you do that, you're working on this stuff and you find success and like you keep going. The biggest question, like I get 100 views on a YouTube video and I'm like, oh my God, like I must be going places, right? I feel like that's kind of like whenever you're used to getting like 10 or 20, it's like you get any more
Yeah.
attention than what you're
Yeah.
used to. It's like, oh wow.
Yeah.
How do you stay humble during your process?
I mean, for me, it's pretty easy, I think, to not let that stuff go to my head, because I have made plenty of stuff nobody cared about. I've made, we've had a variety of interest levels even among the games that we've shipped. There's no part of it is for granted. It can be taken for granted. It's all, we got to earn it every single time. None of it is a foregone conclusion that people are going to love the thing, or that people are going to vibe with it, or that it's going to be the right time to release the thing. So, I really try to, put every ounce of whatever I got into the thing to because that's the part that I can control, right? Is just my personal input. Is really the thing that I have control over, and I know a lot of it is really like not to use the word luck again. I mean, it's like a set of circumstances that allows this thing to happen, right? And I don't have control over those. So for me, when people dig it, I'm stoked, and that doesn't change. Over time. It hasn't changed over time for me. I mean, it's certainly like, maybe it's not quite as shocking as it was initially, but when I see, when we announced we were going to play a show in London, we announced it like 2 weeks before the show. I don't know. It was a school night. We were just doing it because we were there. We were just like, this will be fun. I don't know. We'll see what happens. And we got like 400 people to come out on a Tuesday or whatever, like in a random, and it's like, that felt awesome, because I just didn't know. I had no idea that, playing at a PAX or something is a different thing than playing just a random show with no event attached to it. I mean, at a PAX, like, people have come from all over who are more likely to be fans of the music that I make. So, it's just a different thing. So it's always exciting to me when there's some sort of milestone like that for me that expresses that, because I think, yeah, it's hard to articulate for me, but it's really interesting when I see that kind of thing, and that it always blows me away. Like every time I do something like that, it's always crazy to me,
Well, so that's the answer right there, is you're surprised every single time, no matter what it is. It's like, oh my God, like I made this thing and you think it's rad.
Yeah.
Whoa. Wow. Like, oh,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, no, I think you articulated it. I think the best way to articulate it is literally to not have anything to say, almost. Or it's like, I don't know, man. Like it just, it is what it is. And I keep making stuff because it's what I love doing.
Yeah.
Obviously, you think about, and thank you for answering that too. I understand it might have been kind of it's like,
oh no,
it's like, how do you not get too big for your britches, Darren, or whoever? It's like, you just keep going, and if people like it, that's awesome. So obviously, your kind of entry into the games industry and, really the music industry as well too. Cause I mean, video game music with each passing year gets bigger and bigger and more and more involved.
Yeah.
Your entry into it was way different than quote unquote the traditional way. For someone like myself who would like to end up working, in games and more particularly in music and games, what kind of tips can you give someone like me, who are trying to move forward?
Yeah, that's a tough question for me to answer, because I can't recommend a path into the industry necessarily, but I can tell you what some of the things are that really helped me do the work once the opportunity presented itself. I mean, for me, I think the single most there's two things that have been really helpful. One of them is music production understanding and the ability to be a music engine, a recording engineer and producer, and because that's a critical part of how I work. In general, I'm not preparing music for other people to play. I'm playing it all in and producing the final recording myself that will appear in the game. There's no intermediate steps. I don't have somebody mixing it for me, you know. So the ability to have a command over the entire sort of music pipeline, from being able to play the music, you know, record it yourself, mix it in a way that is satisfying, and put it in the game. I think that's been really helpful for me. So comfort with a DAW of your choice, you know, and a real sort of command over that, and a way that you like to work, and having all that stuff understood and established is really going to be helpful for when the opportunity presents itself. And you know, and the other thing is just songwriting. Like that's what I've used as my foundation for everything that I do is songwriting, because that's where my background is, and that's just what I am comfortable with and what I know. And it's the stuff that I like. I like songs, you know. That's the stuff I like the most. I like it more than scores generally, right? So I approach almost every piece I make as a song, even if it doesn't have vocals. That's sort of how I'm structuring it, and how and I'm applying my understanding of how to record and mix and arrange a song to the scores that I'm making. So yeah, I mean, I would say that can be sort of more broadly like lean into the thing that is your strength. You know, more. It doesn't have to be do the thing I did. You know, it's just that's how I did that thing, right? It's that's where my background is. That's what the stuff I like is, and where I felt like I had something to say. So I think trying to define that stuff for yourself is going to be really helpful. As far as how to break into the industry, I mean, that's a question I get a lot that I don't have a great answer to. You know, when stuff goes back to normal, hopefully, conventions, you know, GDC, you know, Game Sound Con, Indiecade, PAX, that kind of stuff, to varying degrees, will be helpful potentially in making friends and trying to meet people and network and stuff. And I know there are forums and different places on the internet that are places you can go to connect with other people doing what you do, or who are developers looking for people doing what you want to do. And you know, like Game Audio Network Guild is a place that has a lot of resources. Gang, that has a lot of resources for that kind of thing. And the audio community, game audio community, has been really, in general, is really like open and sort of welcoming, and has lots of advice that they will share readily. And you know, even I know a lot of people who've come up through Materia Collective, working on like video game covers and stuff, and arrangements, and then went on to go to like Will Roger, you know, came up through there and went on to do like Call of Duty and whatever, you know. And John Robert Matz participated in that, and even somebody like Kristen Negus, who is an incredibly talented woodwind player, you know, played on a lot of that stuff, and is now playing on all like Austin Wintory's, Gareth Coker's, and everybody's scores, you know. So there are a lot of avenues into it, depending on how, you know, what you want to do. But I think, yeah, anything that will immerse you in a community of those people who are interested in that, or people who are trying to do that, or people who are looking for that, is probably a good bet.
Well, that's solid tips that I think a lot of people, if you come across this, ladies and gentlemen, there's your tip to, from Darren Korb himself. So this is kind of like the final, like, I guess, industry question. I don't know if that's the right word. I'm trying not to be pretentious. So now that Hades is done, quote unquote, are you allowed to talk about what you're working on next?
So the honest truth of the matter is, we don't know what we're working on next.
Okay.
Because again, we're still in Hades land in terms of wrapping all that up. But then in general, we generally don't like to talk about what we're doing until we're ready to announce it. So that's just kind of, you know, until we have something to show for it, because we're all acutely aware that, you know, stuff changes, and if you talk about something too early, then you've made sort of a commitment to that, and we don't want we don't want to do that. So I think in general, and our policy has been to just kind of keep it under wraps, whatever it is, until we are ready to discuss it publicly.
Okay. Well,
which is usually a while down the road of a project.
Well, that's fine. I mean, I'm kind of the same way. It's like, all right, like when I present a new idea to the guys, I'm kind of like, I mean, this is totally different, like mediums, obviously, but it's like, okay, let's record this thing. And then it's like, okay, so we're going to be having that in a couple weeks. And it's like, oh no, we're not releasing any of it until it's done. Like, like we're going to do it like a TV show. That's how I do a TV show. That's why TV shows work.
Finish everything first.
Finish everything. Like, so, that's like all the serious questions I had. You mentioned something in passing. This is going to be kind of like the last topic of discussion.
Sure.
You're a Star Wars guy.
Oh yeah. Well,
so
you quote yes with an asterisk. Okay.
So, do you like the sequels? Because this whole you don't like the sequels at all.
I like three Star Wars movies, and then I kind of like Rogue One. So basically, I like the original Star Wars movies, and I like Rogue One, and I don't like any other Star Wars movies.
Okay, gotcha. So that applies to like the TV shows and stuff like that.
I've been digging The Mandalorian.
Okay, gotcha.
I've been digging that, especially season 1. I really liked.
Yeah.
Season 2 I liked fine, but season 1 I really liked.
Okay, well that's fair enough. That's fine. I feel like I'm in this weird minority of people who just happens to like it all.
Yeah.
And that's
people
fine.
Like it. Some people like all of it.
Yeah, and some people like yourself. It's like I like Mando, the OG, and Rogue One. I think Rogue One's even overrated personally, but whatever.
Yeah.
That's it though, really, for all the questions that I have, Darren. That went pretty much. I don't think that could have gone any better. For me, I was like, God, I hope I don't make myself look like an idiot in front of Darren Korb. But who knows? Maybe I did. The listeners are probably,
no, you did fine.
Yeah, maybe the listeners are like, God, Gabe's an idiot. Well, I thank you so much for your time. Obviously, I want to ask you about something after we get done recording here in a minute. Mm-hmm. Tell people, where they can find you, what you're, obviously you're not working. You said you're not working on anything, but where can people find your music? Plug all.
Sure. Yeah, I'm on just my name all on Spotify and all the streaming platforms, Apple Music and all that stuff, and Bandcamp, Supergiant Games and supergiantgames.com. You can find info about all the games we've made, and I'm on Twitter at Darren Korb. I have a band called Control Group, and we have a couple of records out, and all the proceeds are going to the ACLU if you buy those. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got at the moment.
Well, that's fine. That's a lot. That is plenty to keep the listeners busy and myself. So there's that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. We really, really appreciate it. Make sure you peep the links to stuff down below. We obviously, we have Pop Cult, we have Raise, like we have a few different things. Obviously our various projects you can check in the description down below. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you for preparing. Well, actually, this wasn't even really a review. This was an interview. So just thank you for tuning in. Usually I say this thing at the end of every episode, and I feel weird if I don't say it. So thank you for tuning in, and thank you for preparing yourselves for a plethora of hot takes on potentially unpopular opinions. We will see you next time. Say goodbye, Darren.
Bye.
Whatever possessed you to check out the podcast or the YouTube channel today, I just want to say thank you so much for doing so. If this is your first time here, I would appreciate it, if you would consider subscribing. As you can tell, it's not just me here anymore. I mean, I do stuff by myself, but the podcast is going to reside here from now on, in video form. So if you want to see more content, if you want to be notified, every time we post something, whether it be a clip, a podcast, a review, an interview, whatever it may be, if it's gaming stuff, make sure you click that bell and hit the subscribe button, and we will see you next time. Thanks for sticking around, and thank you for preparing yourselves for a plethora of hot takes and potentially unpopular opinions. I'm Gabriel Fast. I will always be the wannabe critic.